The morning mist clung to the surface of Pinewood Lake like a secret no one wanted to speak. At the far end of Dock 17, an old man in faded denim coveralls sat with a weathered fishing rod, his boots dangling just above the ripples. His name was Clifford Briggs, but most in the new Lakeshore Haven development just called him the Lake Guy, if they bothered to refer to him at all. A pair of joggers passed him on the boardwalk. One of them wrinkled her nose. "Doesn't he have somewhere else to be?" "Ugh, he's always there," the other muttered. "It's like he came with the lake." Clifford didn't flinch. He'd heard worse, seen worse. He simply tapped ash from his corncob pipe and squinted into the mist, listening to the rhythm of the water lapping against the wood. They didn't know this dock was his. Not just in sentiment, but in deed. They didn't know that long before the luxury condos, before the wine tastings and boat parades, this lake had belonged to his father, and his father's father before him. They didn't know he'd built Dock 17 with his own hands in 1971, or that underneath the new HOA-installed signage reading "Private Use Only, Residents of Lakeshore Haven," the wood still bore his initials, carved into the piling in the crooked confidence of a boy who'd once dreamed of fishing the world. But Lakeshore Haven didn't care about that. The HOA president, Victoria Langford, had recently sent Clifford a letter, printed on glossy cardstock and signed in blue ink that wasn't her own. "Dear Mr. Briggs, as per updated community regulations under Lakeshore Haven HOA Policy 9.2.b, individuals not residing within the development are no longer permitted to access private docks. Failure to comply will result in daily fines and further action." It had ended with, "Thank you for your understanding." Clifford chuckled when he read it, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. "Understanding?" he muttered. "You don't understand a damn thing." That same afternoon, a young man in khakis and a name badge approached the dock. "Sir, I'm with the HOA compliance team. I need you to vacate this property immediately." Clifford reeled in his line slowly. "Why don't you come sit for a spell? You look like you've never watched the water think." "Sir, this isn't a request. I'm authorized to issue a citation." "Son, do you know what was here before your HOA compliance teams? Before the gates and the newsletters and the tennis courts?" The man hesitated. Clifford stood up. He wasn't tall, but the quiet steel in his posture made him seem 10 feet high. "Mud, trees, my dad's rowboat, and the promise that if you respect the land, it'll respect you back." The man blinked. I'm just doing my job, sir." "Then tell your boss I'll be here tomorrow too." That night, the HOA sent security. They posted a warning sign on Dock 17. "Trespassers will be fined and reported." They didn't know Clifford kept the original property survey framed above his fireplace, the one showing the Briggs family holding rights to the shoreline long before Lakeshore Haven LLC had ever existed. They also didn't know Clifford had once held a seat on the State Wetlands Advisory Board, or that he still had friends in the assessor's office, or that he'd quietly been buying parcels of seemingly worthless land surrounding the lake for the last 15 years. But they would, very soon. The next morning, Clifford was there again, fishing rod in hand. Same spot, same steady silence. But this time, tucked beneath his tackle box sat a manila folder. Inside it, a notarized deed to Dock 17, original riparian rights documentation from 1948, a lawyer's letter addressed directly to Victoria Langford. Clifford didn't like lawsuits, but he loved justice. And this was no longer about a dock. This was about memory, respect, and the arrogance of those who thought money could pave over legacy. A year later, the lake was quiet again. Not silent, just peaceful. Birdsong replaced court arguments. The hum of fishing reels replaced political whispers. The chaos had passed, but its echo still rippled through Pinewood Lake. Clifford Briggs stood on Dock 17, now freshly painted and lined with wooden benches. A small plaque shimmered in the morning light. To those who stand firm, even when the tide turns against them. The Lakeshore Haven HOA no longer existed. After the court's ruling and an explosive public audit, the board dissolved. New legislation had been introduced statewide to regulate HOA authority on riparian land. The old guard? Disgraced, fined, forgotten. But something else rose in its place. The Pinewood Community Trust. Not a board of enforcers, but a coalition of residents, fishermen, teachers, single moms, veterans, retirees. And Clifford? They asked him to chair it. He declined. "No thanks," he chuckled. "I've got a fish to catch." But he showed up to every meeting, sat in the back, sipping coffee, ready to speak when needed. Jaden Knox's documentary, The Lake That Remembers, premiered at 3 film festivals. It won 2 awards, but more importantly, it was watched by millions. High schoolers in Chicago wrote essays about it. College law students in Virginia debated it in class. An elderly man in Texas emailed Clifford a photo of his own dock, built in 1964, with the subject line, "You inspired me not to give up." Summer came again. Families picnicked under sycamore trees. Teenagers skipped rocks across the water. Children laughed as they learned to bait a hook. And in the heart of it all, Dock 17 stood quietly, not as a monument to victory, but to persistence. One evening, Clifford brought a folding chair and an old radio to the dock. He tuned it to a country station, set his line, and let his boots dangle above the water. As the sun began to set, he heard footsteps. Jaden. "Back for more footage?" Clifford asked, without turning. "Nope," Jaden smiled. Just came to say thanks." Clifford nodded. "You help more than you know, son." Jaden handed him a new copy of the documentary, now in a hard case with a cover photo of Clifford standing at sunrise. "This lake changed because of you." Clifford chuckled. "The lake didn't change. It just remembered who it belonged to." Later, as stars appeared and the water turned to glass, Clifford sat quietly. The gentle splash of a fish, the crickets in the reeds, the creak of the dockboards beneath him. And in that stillness, he whispered, "You remember me, don't you?" As if in answer, a soft breeze rippled the surface. Yes, the lake remembered. The courtroom was small, old, and smelled faintly of varnish and forgotten paper. It wasn't built for media attention, yet today every bench was full. Reporters leaned forward, notepads ready. Cameras from local news crews perched like vultures in the back. At the plaintiff's table sat Clifford Briggs, wearing his Sunday flannel and weathered boots. Beside him, attorney Naya Santiago flipped through a thick binder labeled Land Use and Ownership, Pinewood Lake, 1935 to present. Across the aisle, 3 sharp-suited attorneys and a visibly pale Victoria Langford, who had come out of hiding only after being subpoenaed. The judge, an older black woman with a calm but piercing gaze, looked up. "Ms. Santiago, you may proceed." Naya stood. Her tone was cool, controlled. "Your Honor, we intend to prove today that the Lakeshore Haven HOA, under the leadership of Ms. Langford, knowingly violated state water boundary laws and falsified survey maps to claim ownership of lakefront property that has never legally belonged to them." She tapped the binder. "And we will begin with one document they forgot to bury, the original 1937 Waterline Act." Flashback. Pinewood Lake, 1937. Clifford's grandfather, Samuel Briggs, helped dig the first channels that would become the modern shoreline. Back then, the state passed a law stating that any land below the 1937 spring flood waterline remained public, or, in the case of long-standing private ownership, permanently exempt from annexation. No HOA, no community board, no future developer could ever override that. It had become local myth until Clifford pulled the original map from the family trunk. Naya placed the oversized map on an easel. The courtroom gasped. A red line, clearly drawn, traced around Dock 17, outside the HOA boundaries. She pointed. "This dock and the land it sits on were never under HOA jurisdiction, not in 2019, not now, not ever." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Defense?" One of the HOA lawyers scrambled to respond. "We were unaware of this document's existence." "That," the judge interrupted, "is not a legal defense." Outside the courthouse, the crowd grew larger. Lake residents watched on screens set up by reporters. Jaden Knox live-streamed the hearing, narrating each revelation. Clifford Briggs just turned an HOA takedown into a land rights history lesson, and the state's watching. Victoria Langford, sweating in silence, finally broke. "This is absurd. That dock was barely standing. It was an eyesore." "An eyesore to you, a legacy to me." He held up a black-and-white photo, his father and grandfather on Dock 17, smiling, holding a catfish twice their size. "This was before your community even existed. My family built this place when it was nothing but wild reeds and dirt roads. You think your laminated maps can erase that?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge looked moved. Later that day, the judge issued her ruling. Dock 17 was officially recognized as private historical property. The HOA was ordered to cease all claims and activities within the 1937 waterline, and a formal audit was launched into HOA finances and illegal expansions, and Victoria Langford banned from serving in any HOA or real estate capacity for life. Clifford didn't cheer. He just tipped his fishing hat as he walked out of the courtroom. By sunset, a new sign stood beside Dock 17. Historical landmark, Briggs Dock, estimated 1971, protected under Minnesota Public Water Act. And at the foot of the dock, neighbors had laid flowers, a thank you note, even a small American flag. Clifford stood at the edge once again, gazing out at the lake. Jaden approached quietly, camera in hand. "One final quote for the documentary?" Clifford nodded. "They forgot the waterline. They forgot history. It wasn't over." Sure, Clifford had stopped the demolition. Sure, Victoria Langford had disappeared from her HOA throne. But as the water stilled around Dock 17, Clifford noticed something deeper beneath the surface, not just of the lake, but of the system that governed it. He started with the permits, the ones the HOA used to build the new private marina, the ones they claimed were legally filed. He walked into the county recorder's office with the simple question, "Can I see the environmental impact reports for the Lakeshore Haven expansion in 2019? The clerk stared at her screen. "I don't see any." Clifford leaned in. You mean to tell me they poured concrete into a public lake bed and didn't file a single environmental report? The clerk paused. Sir, I'm not supposed to comment. That's okay, Clifford said, pulling out his notebook. I'm not asking for comment. I'm asking for copies. That night, Clifford met with Jaden Knox again. In a corner booth of the local diner, under flickering neon lights, he laid out a stack of documents. These aren't just missing permits. These are forged boundaries, false survey maps. The HOA has been stealing public lake access for years. Jaden's eyes widened. And nobody noticed? They noticed, Clifford said. They just got paid to look away. The next day, Jaden released a new video. They tried to fine an old man. Now he's uncovering a multi-million-dollar cover-up. It spread like fire. Reporters from regional networks started calling. Environmental agencies were tagged on Twitter. And down at Lakeshore Haven, the remaining board members started to sweat. Meanwhile, Clifford kept digging. He filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all HOA financial disclosures and found something worse. Over $300,000 labeled as shoreline enhancement grants. A private landscaping firm linked to Victoria Langford's brother. Several checks signed with forged county authorizations. He showed the files to a local attorney, Ms. Naya Santiago, young, brilliant, and just as angry. This isn't just fraud, she said. This is land laundering. Explain it to me like I'm just a fisherman, Clifford grinned. They, quote, improve land they don't own, then sell rights to it, then use those fake sales to raise HOA dues, which they funnel through shell companies. So they've been taxing their neighbors to steal the lake. Exactly. Clifford gave her everything, and Naya filed suit, not just against the HOA, but personally naming Victoria Langford, her brother, and 2 county officials. The district attorney soon joined the investigation. The lake, once a place of serenity, was now the center of a storm. Back at the dock, Clifford noticed something strange. More people were coming. Not just journalists or supporters, but neighbors, real ones. Folks who'd been afraid to speak. An elderly couple who'd been fined $10,000 for painting their porch the wrong shade of blue. A single mother forced to sell her home after being denied access to the shared dock. A veteran who lost his lakeside cabin due to non-compliant garden fencing. They all told Clifford the same thing. We didn't know who to turn to. We didn't think we had a choice. Thank you for fighting. And Clifford, always modest, simply said, you don't have to fight alone anymore. The next week, a town hall was held. The HOA board tried to cancel it, but the mayor, after seeing Jaden's videos, overruled them. This land, the mayor said on stage, belongs to the people who live here, not the ones who exploit it. Clifford stood in the back of the room as the community finally spoke up. Applause broke out. A recall vote was announced, and Dock 17 became more than a dock. It became a rallying point. That night, Clifford returned to the lake alone. Moonlight shimmered across the water. He sat at the edge of the dock, legs dangling, tackle box untouched. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to exhale. The morning fog had barely lifted when a group of uniformed workers arrived at Pinewood Lake. They were contractors, sent by the Lakeshore Haven HOA under strict orders from President Victoria Langford. Their task? Tear down Dock 17. No warning, no permits, just quiet orders carried out at dawn, the kind of hour when neighbors weren't watching. One worker, a young man named Lewis, scratched his head as he looked at the structure. Looks sturdy. Been here a while. His supervisor shrugged. Doesn't matter. Orders are to take it down before noon. But Clifford Briggs wasn't asleep. He stood at the shoreline, arms folded, calm but unmoving. Behind him was a folding chair, his tackle box, and a manila folder, same one he carried to City Hall. "You boys have a permit for this?" he asked, voice slow and steady. The supervisor hesitated. "Sir, we were hired to dismantle this dock. This is HOA property." Clifford walked forward. "Not this dock. This dock was built by my hands in 1971. I poured every nail and beam into it after the spring floods. You want to tear it down, you better have more than orders. You better have court approval." Lewis lowered his crowbar. "Sir, you're saying this is your dock?" "I'm not saying it. The state of Minnesota is." He handed over a notarized deed and a copy of the riparian rights certificate. "Now go ahead and swing that crowbar. You'll be hitting my land, my property, and my lawyer's payday." Word of the confrontation spread fast. By afternoon, #Doc17 was trending locally. The video of Clifford standing in front of the demolition crew, unshaken, unapologetic, had gone viral. People weren't just watching a man defend a dock. They were watching a man defend history. And it was electrifying. Victoria Langford was furious. Who gave him the chance to speak? Where was legal enforcement? "Ma'am," replied her assistant meekly, "he had documentation. We can't override property law." "Then sue him." "For what, exactly?" Victoria's hand curled into a fist. "We were supposed to own that shoreline. It was part of the 2019 expansion." "Apparently not. Clifford's deed predates Lakeshore Haven by decades. Our title company missed it." Silence. And then, "Get me PR control, now!" But Clifford wasn't interested in press conferences. He was preparing the next phase. At a small lakeside cafe, he sat down with Jaden Knox, the young documentarian. "Ready to tell the whole story?" Jaden asked. Clifford nodded. "I want people to understand. This isn't about fences or fines. It's about the lie that progress has to erase the past." Jaden set up the camera. Clifford leaned into the lens. "You can pave over land, but you can't pave over memory." The interview aired on Jaden's channel that night. Within hours, national media picked it up. The man who fought the HOA and won. Doc17 becomes symbol of quiet rebellion. Elderly fisherman schools elitist community. Offers flooded in, from lawyers, land rights activists, even senators. But Clifford turned most of them down. He didn't want attention. He wanted respect restored. Not just for himself, but for every old man, farmer, or widow who'd been pushed aside by glossy developments and false authority. The next week, HOA board members called for an emergency re-election. Some of them, seeing public opinion turn, resigned. Victoria Langford refused, until Clifford's attorney sent her a new envelope. Cease and desist, trespassing violation, property defamation, illegal demolition order. It was no longer about fines. It was about criminal liability. Victoria disappeared from public view within days. On the first Saturday of the letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope, sealed with the gaudy Lakeshore Haven HOA emblem, two golden oars crossing over a lake shaped like a heart. Clifford Briggs chuckled bitterly. Cute. They think this is theirs. He slipped the envelope open with his fishing knife and unfolded the pages. They weren't just escalating the fines. Now they were threatening legal action. Repeated unauthorized use of HOA property will result in civil penalties, eviction from premises, and forfeiture of any implied access rights. Clifford ran his fingers across the thick cardstock. "Implied?" he muttered. "That dock has my name carved into it." Across town, Victoria Langford, the HOA president, was on the phone with the Lakeshore Haven legal team. "He's ignoring our notices, Brian. I want him off that dock. Now!" "Legally, Ms. Langford, it's complicated," said her lawyer, sounding unusually cautious. "There are old deeds involved, county records, historical water access rights. I don't care if he baptized his children in that lake. He's not one of us. I won't have this relic ruining our property values." But Clifford had already begun his counterattack, quiet and legal. Inside his lakeside cabin, he pulled a fireproof case from beneath the floorboards and opened it. Inside, a dusty 1948 riparian rights certificate, signed in faded ink. Tax receipts showing continuous land use for over 60 years. And a deed, notarized, clean, and devastating, showing that Dock 17 was built on land Clifford still owned, even after the surrounding property was sold off. "You wanted a fight, Victoria. You picked the wrong lake." The next day, Clifford drove into the county clerk's office. A young woman at the front desk looked up as he entered. "Help you with something, sir?" "I'm here to file a land dispute," he said, laying down the folder. "And I want copies of every zoning change, property transfer, and environmental permit related to Pinewood Lake since 1999. She blinked. "That's going to be a lot." Clifford grinned. "Good, I've got time." That evening, Jaden Knox, a part-time documentarian and full-time firebrand, uploaded his first video about Clifford's battle. The title, "The HOA Wants to Erase This Man. Here's What They Don't Know." It showed Clifford talking about his grandfather, his father, the first fish he caught as a boy, and how the HOA now tried to fine him for standing where his family had stood for generations. Within 24 hours, the video hit 300,000 views. Victoria Langford watched it from her office, seething. "Delete this," she snapped to her assistant. "It's on YouTube, ma'am. It's kind of everywhere now." "Then sue him for slander." "We'd have to prove it's false." Victoria went quiet, because deep down, she knew it wasn't. Meanwhile, Clifford was doing more than just fishing and filing. He called a contact in the county surveyor's office, an old friend named Harold Tate, who still owed him a favor from their days on the Wetlands Board. "Harry, I need access to the original lake basin maps, the 1955 floodplain zones, and anything showing shoreline ownership." "You stirring up trouble again, Cliff?" Harold chuckled. "Not trouble," Clifford said. "Truth." On the fourth day of his paper war, Clifford walked into City Hall wearing his best boots and carrying a bound packet of documentation. The receptionist looked confused. "Mr. Briggs, do you have an appointment?" "Nope," he said, "but I have rights." He handed over the file. Inside, a demand for cease and desist against the HOA, evidence of land ownership, historical documentation that the HOA had built their security fence illegally onto his property line. The legal grenade had been thrown. Back at Dock 17, Clifford sat with his rod again. Only this time, reporters had begun to trickle in. "Is it true you own part of the lake?"